Recording in progress.
There we are. Hello, everybody. We'll give it 30 more seconds to let people hop in and we'll get rolling here. All right, I see a few more joining. We'll start at the 1 minute after. And there we are. So without further ado, and for the sake of time, everyone, welcome to a roundtable discussion around AI in our industry with Prompt Security and GuidePoint Security. My name is Stephen Fitzgerald. I'm a director on the solutions engineering side, and my job today is really to facilitate a conversation that we think is really around some interesting and really prevalent topics right now, right? Around AI, agentic security, building programs, and really the place of these new technologies, I guess, in our workforce, right, and how we see this. I'm very lucky to be joined by some panelists, which will introduce themselves pretty soon. And we can really have an open, kind of free-form discussion around how this operates. I encourage you, while we will not necessarily be opening up kind of the phones right away, please feel free to write your questions either in chat or in the Q&A section. I will monitor them and provide insights. And if there are some that we think is worthwhile answering in person, we will bring those up at the end. So expect about 45 minutes of content with time for questions that we can review and go from there. If you don't know much about Prompt, just for some context, Prompt Security is obviously an AI kind of security platform that's designed to give people the ability to safeguard every part of their AI journey, right? From employee usage of public AI tools, from copilots and agents, and protecting your homegrown applications from threats like prompt injection, data leakage, contact toxicity, and more. We're super proud to make sure that we can kind of give you those options to be able to give visibility, granular policy control, and runtime security at scale. We're very lucky to be partners with GuidePoint, and we're very proud of that interaction. And really have had some great success leveraging not only ours, but their expertise to go forward together and help organizations across North America securely embrace AI. With that context, what I'd love to do is I'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and we can really get rolling on our content. So Dan, we'll start with you.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Dan Solero. I'm with AT&T, and I have many roles, but the one that's most relevant for this conversation is I lead our AI defense program here. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Dennis? Fantastic. Felix, we'll go to you.
Felix Simmons. I'm a principal security architect here at GuidePoint. I do some contribution for the OWASP Large Language Model Top 10, and I'm a named contributor for the CIS benchmark for Azure. Very nice to meet everybody.
Fantastic. And Benji, we'll end with you, last but not least.
Hey, I'm Benji. I'm head of product at Prompt. I've been with the company for pretty much close to its beginning, and looking forward to a great discussion today.
Fantastic. Well, we're very lucky to have all your insights. And again, I encourage you to keep this kind of collaborative and feel free to hop in at any point. But really just to set the stage, I guess we'll kind of see. I know we talked about agentic AI. AI plays different roles in different organizations. Maybe Dan, we'll start with you again. What role kind of does AI play, and how do you currently see it in your business?
So first of all, AT&T is like every other large company in the planet right now, looking for AI to be transformative across many of our business processes. Where we see the most uptake on it and actually use and returning value is in the area of software development, whether that's leveraging AI-powered IDEs or specific programs around transforming legacy code to modern code. We see a lot of work in that area. And then kind of the empowering individuals to transform their own individual work process using a RAG type of architecture or Microsoft Copilot. We see a lot of uptake on that as well.
Nice. No, that makes that makes sense. And I guess Dennis and Felix, I'm curious what you all see as well.
I think Dan hit one thing that was really important. So when you look at the transformation, he said business transformation, DevSecOps, cloud, they were IT transformation. They supported the business through efficiency, automation, faster delivery of workload, right? When you look at what's going on with AI, you're actually seeing business transformation and business function and process. And so, like, I think one of the things that's slightly different is we're not just transforming IT systems, we're transforming business process. And because of that, I think the business is even more engaged. I engage with customers usually historically for DevSecOps from an AppSec perspective or cloud from a cloud security perspective. It's been, with the security group, with AI, I've been meeting with cross-functional teams of business, infrastructure, app dev, and security. And so like I think we're starting to push into an era where, we learned our lessons with DevSecOps, we learned our lessons with cloud. I think cross-functional groups are one big difference I'm noticing more so than before.
Yeah, a couple of points from our end. One, honestly, as just as a consumer, so now just sort of speaking from on behalf of like Prompt and what we see with customers, but internally on my team on the product side, and to pick up on what Dan said, like we're using Cursor and all these AI assisted or AI powered generation capabilities in a way that really I've had some coding experience in the past, but it really allowed both myself to really build things without the help of R&D and really get to at least POCs in a way that's way, way faster. And even junior folks on my team have been able to, in some cases, even replace engineering folks because you have the sort of, not to sort of talk too much up, product management, but like you have the sort of product mindset of what's the problem we're looking to solve. And you're able to do things cross like data science, sort of hardcore engineering to whether it's sort of ETL of data and really sort of working with data at a very large scale, pulling different data points and doing the research like wicked fast, and really like increasing productivity in a way that in areas we didn't really think possible. And then just sort of giving the broad level view of what we see a lot of customers do. I think the adoption certainly, and I'm sure we'll talk about the sort of employee and usage of like Gen AI from ChatGPT, et cetera. But really the increased adoption of sort of homegrown application. We're seeing really cool things, whether it's like just internal sort of versions of like a chat GPT alternative, or folks just want to have data residency that's like completely self-owned. And then of course sort of customer facing ones for very, very large organizations that are really looking to protect those and really up level every sort of consumer customer facing application of theirs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a few interesting points actually that you mentioned on some of these things of like kind of Dennis, you actually even mentioned kind of replacing entities of some of these things, right? I'm curious as you all see it. Another point that came to mind I always find interesting that gives the most variable answers is like you looked at it, Benji, from a product side. Dennis, you mentioned almost as an entity. Who owns that, right? Is that now an engineering thing? Is that a compliance thing? Is that GRC? Like when you turn to your business and you want to move forward with AI and push that, like who are you talking to and where does responsibility for that really fall?
Let's see. Oh no, go ahead. By all means. Yeah, I'd also say that whenever there's new technology, we instantly build new functions, right? So like, it's human nature. So I think a lot of places have this is our AI steering committee or this is our AI governance group, and I've seen a lot of that. But one of the things that I actually prefer to see, and I see this at some customers, is they're taking the components of AI and baking it into existing program that has existing, established process and approach. And I think when you start to look at things like, an AI usage policy is going to line up with your GRC team most likely, right? When you start to look at your data usage and how data, which is a big part of AI, data and third-party risk are the two biggest things I would say. When you start to look at data and data security, you have groups that are focused on that. I think as far as adoption of new services, especially as both every SaaS product out there is starting to incorporate it, and every major cloud provider has specific services for developing against. I think that brings in your architecture group, which should be leading and coordinating with a lot of other teams. But yeah, I am seeing like still a very discrete structure stand up where we are the AI people. Usually it's either former cloud people, former AppSec people, former app dev people that are kind of heading that up. But that's usually what I'm seeing.
Um, I think it depends, right? The answer to that question depends on what your business objectives are. Um, so from a high level perspective, if a business is looking at AI as a transformation of their workforce or a fundamental transformation of the way they operate as a business, then that really has to be up at a senior level. So some kind of ERM or enterprise risk management or steering committee up at that level needs to be involved. But the stakeholder groups that are involved really come down to how you're using AI and what you're using it to do. Like it would be a really bad idea to not include legal and privacy and regulatory um, and all of the stakeholders that we always talk about in the context of GRC being something that's enterprise wide, not just something that the security team owns or not the data office or not many companies probably have bespoke AI leadership teams, but really, when you think about how the technology can be transformative across broad swaths of a business, it really needs to include the senior most executives for steering and decision making.
I'll just add, well, like one note that what I'm seeing from the field is that I mean, and you may think of some other sort of really tectonic shifts in technology in the past, but like we're both seeing the sort of top-down sort of leadership movement that Dan just mentioned, but also there's a very big pull from the bottom or push rather for adoption, right? And so as you're seeing whatever marketing asking for Canva AI and finance is asking whatever Salesforce, Agentforce, et cetera, you're seeing all these sort of downward or sort of movements from the bottom that are really pushing everyone into motion. And so it's not just like I don't know what typical GRC push would be, but it's really sort of coming from all directions. And I think really mandating from certainly from the executive level to have a response, the sort of app to the sort of level of demand from a business transformation, technological transformation perspective.
And
Yeah, so
Benji, I
that
think you
that
hit something
really.
on the head there. Oh,
I, you go.
no, after you, after you.
I was just going to say, sorry about that, Felix. I was just going to say that really should light a fire under GRC teams. Like if there's a big push from the bottom to use these things and there are no, if the rules are unclear, if the controls are weak, or if the process is not working, that could rapidly turn into a major shadow IT type of situation where you've got unmitigated risk. Go ahead, Felix.
No, and I was gonna say Benji hit something right on the head. The variety of workload and the variety of approaches. Like for the beginning of cloud, there was some uncertainty, but eventually it became there's two or three design patterns that most large enterprises are doing, right? With AI right now, I've got customers that are adopting like Bedrock, Vertex, and the cloud provider brokered model access. I have others that are going with the enterprise versions of like Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and things like that. I have other customers that are just consuming third-party services a la Cursor and Windsurf and things like that. But like when you kind of really distill it, right now there's still enough variety to enterprise patterns that like the established way isn't there. And because of that, everybody's got to keep their gloves up and everybody's got to do extra due diligence and review of all of the new services that are being brokered in front of them. So, yep.
Yeah. It's a good point actually that somebody brought up, right? And we talk about kind of the push from the bottom up, right? And as somebody who definitely has never opened up a port from home because I want to get into the system, obviously we always use the approved things, right? And I think it's interesting where we say it's both top down and bottom up. And Dan, you mentioned kind of the shadow component. How do you all see that? Like when people talk about shadow AI now, right? It's not like cloud where there's six people you can realistically go with. There's a million tools, right, that you can use. Like, is that something you see people pushing to? How are you gaining that, or how do you see that problem?
Uh, so it's not all that different from shadow IT proper or just uncontrolled use of open source software in some organizations that I've seen. But like there are fundamental differences with AI. One being MCP that I think we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But
Yeah.
when you think about some of the um, just the architectural changes that are happening at a rapid pace, just like the AI itself is moving at a rapid pace. From a security and a risk management perspective, having an understanding of what do you have, what are you protecting, like the fundamental inventory question of the CSF is crucial. And we're seeing a lot. And if you were at RSA or really any kind of any industry event with security, you could throw a rock and hit probably 10 different startups that are doing the same thing. But the shape of the marketplace for AI security is a little bit unsettled right now. So making choices on which of your technology that you may already have is capable of helping discover and put together an inventory of your AI, the usage of AI inside the fence, outside the fence, third parties, vendors, is a very, very hard challenge. We're seeing pretty good success from leveraging CNAP tools, DSPM tools, DLP tools, EDR tools. There's a lot of choices. But what we're honestly seeing as a pain point, I'm not speaking for AT&T here, but for some of the peers that I speak to, is the sprawl of AI is unlike anything we've seen before, because now it's starting to pop up kind of without notice into commercial off-the-shelf software, SaaS platforms. I think Felix mentioned it's all over the place. So getting that fundamental and authoritative inventory is crucial, and finding the tools to help get there is a challenge.
Yeah, I think you hit something when you hit MCP. We saw in the beginning of AI, the focus was on user flow into these services and how do I put a DLP engine in front of that. I think that was, if you go back 8 months to a year, that was top of mind for everybody. Now, MCP and the exposure of APIs indirectly to AI, I think it's got top of mind presence, but I think the reality of how bad it is isn't really imbibed. Like if you look at GitHub has a MCP registry. Last I looked, it was 20,000 strong. It's a inherently natively insecure protocol that people are rallying around, and the rush to rally behind it without the appropriate safeguards. They're baking in things like headers and additional security controls, but the bottle's already off, right? And so what I'm seeing with a lot of customers is not just MCP, but agents in general. There are certain technologies that can look for agents in your environment, and I think that visibility is important because we did a product eval with a customer. They didn't realize they had Copilot agents basically environment wide. They had them everywhere, and from their perspective, it was an unauthorized service, and so they didn't even know it was in the environment. And I think visibility is that first step, and then they can take action based off of figuring out, well, how is this adopted? What are the channels that this went through? What review has been done? Do we understand the security footprint and the story there? But in my opinion, MCP is probably going to be the most attacked protocol in 2026. So, yep. Mhm.
And one point on the MCP, and I'm 100% like that's going to be the sort of big thing coming into next calendar year, is that up until now, it's more or less been in the sort of more in the developer range where you have to do a bit more work to like get it set up. But now, as we're seeing, and folks here, I'm sure, are like ChatGPT users, it's sort of embedded natively and you're integrating with like Google Drive and Slack, et cetera. It's like MCP, but no one really thinks about it as MCP. But the level of access, so putting aside the malicious aspects that are potentially really sort of off the shelf, like open source MCPs, even the sort of legit official ones with like the velocity of adoption and the level of access, like folks like random people can hook up an MCP, an official, whatever, Google Drive MCP, and do all sorts of things that you wouldn't even want with like sort of permission issues and authorization and just sort of level of access and capability that with this sort of really incredible power of LLMs and Gen AI, but really potentially to all sorts of sort of sensitive data exfiltration and sort of all those kind of issues that have been sort of burst open with that level of connectivity.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I double down on the MCP gateway front because I think like in the beginning, everybody looks for where do I have the use of MCP in my environment, where I'm starting to see the turn and third party ecosystem. So like Prompt has one. There's a few players that have MCP gateways, and in my opinion, when you start to look at, it's not just about where the agents are and where your MCP servers are. It's also understanding what are the tools that are exposed to those agents, what's the types of data that's flowing for those agents, and just understanding like we do scrutiny around our APIs to an extent of also needing to understand discovery, needing to understand data flows, needing to understand the security posture and hygiene. I think MCP, if you really extend it, is just an extended API. It is an access point for AI to interact with your traditional APIs. I think it's a transitional technology. Something will come along after the fact eventually, but for now, it's what we have, and I think tackling it like you would your API security program is something that you can definitely wrap your head around too.
The S in MCP stands for security, so we're all good.
Okay.
And I think part of that
You
too,
know,
it's interesting.
let me make the discussion a bit more spicy. I'll take the contrarian point to Felix on that one. I
Hmm.
admit I was like 100% until like while I tried to set up MCP in Claude like whatever 6 months ago or so, and I'm like a fairly technical person, I was having challenges. So I
Hmm.
thought like this is going nowhere. But honestly, once like OpenAI adopted it, both the format overall and embedded in the system itself, like just with the level of market penetration that the ChatGPT has, it's like I think it'll be very difficult to dethrone that. And like I'm not saying it lightly. Like
Hmm.
there very well might be one, but it's going to be a tough pull just because once OpenAI like adopt like the OpenAI schema has been like
Hmm.
heavily adopted. Once they've adopted MCP, which is pretty crazy since it's an Anthropic sort of framework,
Hmm.
it's going to be quite challenging to dethrone that. I think.
No, I give you that. I will say though, it will iterate. I think the next version of MCP. I mean, we've seen headers introduced for security. We've seen OAuth flows now with MCP. I think
Mm,
what we need to see further of is just reinforcement of some of the security primitives. Like when it dropped, it came out like a protocol from the 90s, and
yeah.
where we are now is definitely night and day from that. I think the one-to-one relationship that it had in the beginning, now we see multi-Hydra MCP where it's one server, multiple connection points.
Yeah.
But I agree. I will
Yeah.
say though, it has to go through some change though.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
There we go. There we go. Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I genuinely feel A2A is being more securely designed than MCP was originally. Like I think it started with a more secure thought process around its design because it had the luxury of coming out afterwards, right? So
I think
Yeah, that could.
the security technology companies and the enterprise CISO community and the regulators, I think will catch up. And there will be some form of pushback, or not pushback is the wrong way to say it, but some form of influence over the future of MCP.
Mhm.
Yeah. I guess with that, as we talk about kind of MCP, and I say it's like agentic AI can't hurt me. It's like until you gave it a tool to do so, then it can, right? But my whole thing with that is, I guess, as we're adding layers now to AI, right? There used to be, to your point, you're generating some pictures, and now it's to the point where it has theoretical control over a SQL database, right? It's going across there, and I guess a question as we look at some of these things, right, from an enterprise perspective, maybe what are some of the pitfalls and the mistakes that either you've experienced or kind of you've seen your peers do when you're developing a comprehensive program now, given all these different layers in your enterprise?
Mhm.
I would build on that, Dennis. Those are great answers, and I agree with them wholeheartedly. And I would also build on that one pitfall is assuming that AI is like any other technology and your existing controls are going to be good enough, which they may be, they may well be, but like a DLP provider 2 years ago certainly had all of the fundamental tools to help defend against data sprawl, but not looking at it from the perspective of how AI works and how that data movement can have a different impact in an AI context than it does, say, in a data virtualization context. And then the other pitfall, I would say, not saying I fell into this trap myself, but it is hard earned. Is There are still a huge number of startups that are solving for a piece of the overall AI security need, and they're necessary. That's a good thing. It's moving the industry. But the sort of the traditional security companies are catching up through internal development or acquisition um, or something along those lines. And just in terms of running your security organization like a business, it's a really good practice to check the capabilities that are on the roadmap of the tools that you already have and use and pay for, so that you're not further fracturing your own tech stack, and driving inefficiencies within your own organization.
I would, I would, I'd agree with everything that's been said, and I'd also throw in ignoring technical debt that's been in the environment. I think one of the areas that I see this really hit with AI is as AI agents are adopted and they have the ability to go through things like SharePoint and OneDrive and your local shares, old permission issues of overly accessible documentation gets ingested, and so that's a sin of the past. I think like when you look at some of your most programs, in my opinion, are very lacking in data security, right? I think it's a very hard task to truly tackle, And I think AI is really just fanning the flames on that because we make assumptions about our program. But at the end of the day, even before AI, at a lot of places, you could upload files to basic web uploads on any blog website. Uh, for the people that have tackled that, I think some of those DLP engines are being applied, but not necessarily always hitting the mark with every AI technology that's out there. And so I think there's a an over reliance to your point of older tech that maybe has not adopted to an understanding and kind of the usage for AI. So that's definitely a concern.
I think, and also not necessarily a pitfall, but one of the sort of underlying challenges of the sort of domain of AI security writ large is that the sort of ground is shifting so rapidly. Like whatever MCP we talked about came, what, 8 months ago, roughly, or something like that. Last year we didn't even think about it. Like, who knows what's going to be 8 months from now, 2 years from now? And so even like we talked about like procurement and whether you would go niche player, platform, whatever, like it's very, very difficult to predict what your sort of AI security needs will be, 6 months from now, a year from now, like what the level of adoption it's going to be, physical AI, wearable, like who knows, right? And so the sort of underlying all of it is this sort of need to be really sort of agile and sort of rapidly responding from a sort of technology perspective to something that is both rapidly evolving, and the level of adoption is really, I think, unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Mhm.
There's a with that as well. It's funny as you look at security programs. I always find it interesting when like in like shared responsibility model with cloud, right? Theoretically, there's a line. It's like, hey, this is on you, this is on us, right? And funny enough, I see a lot of times I talk to people. They're like, oh, the model will handle that, and then shockingly, it doesn't, right? When you're scoping some of these things out, and Benji, maybe I'll start with you, just because we use it a lot internally. Like, where do you see security kind of falling in that line? Like, is it on the model? Is it on us? Is it on both? Like, where does that interaction and that responsibility matrix look like to you?
Sorry, did you say that to me? Sorry, I didn't see.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's the easy answer to say it's like the shared model, right? The shared model of responsibility, no pun intended. I think and we sort of should probably segment between the sort of employee end user use case and the sort of homegrown application use case, which has more of the application security mindset that I think is easier to sort of wrap your head around. But like the employee use case, the one where like every employee, every department is now adopting it in a way that's like it's an incredible tool, but obviously has a lot of potential security gaps and exposures. I think that's the area that's like more difficult to sort of grok overall, because it's like shadow IT, but like on steroids, really. Like again, we talked about the connectivity, the power, APIs, MCP, et cetera. I think that's where the level of responsibility of individual employees and whether how it's going to be sort of a trust model, or it will require sort of rethinking of what security looks like on the individual employee side. That's sort of my perspective, at least.
I will double down and say that the user flows is something that, in my opinion, like I work with customers with new technology. There is a dwell time where business just accepts risk for a period of time. I think we're starting to push into a territory where a lot of places, because the question I always ask in the user flows is, what's stopping this user from uploading a spreadsheet with 100,000 records that they shouldn't be, right? And most of the time is like, well, we have a policy or we have this or that. Maybe our data security engine might catch it, might not. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I think we're crossing into a territory where this is no longer a new question, right? And so I think part of that issue is, there are hard controls that can help with that, right? And I think the problem is the business is still watching this uncertain landscape shift. They don't want to pull at the wrong moment and buy an antiquated technology. But in my opinion, the risk is real. Human nature is easiest path, fastest path. And so like whether or not the policy says it, if your deadline is next week and I have to summarize this data and I have to write this code, I'm going to upload whatever I need to. And I think that's the persona that you need to expect for and plan for. And I think the day of soft controls is over for this particular technology use case, right? The other side, the app dev side, I think MITRE does a really good job of breaking out inferencing where you're using external models and you're bringing your data versus training where you're training your models. And I think breaking that mindset out breaks that problem out. And I think a lot of the inferencing is what I see most places doing, with some doing training for competitive advantage. And I think they each have their own problem set there, in addition to just the user flows that were the most important last year, right?
I would expand a little bit on that. So I'm personally not a fan of the shared responsibility model as a way to simplify who is ultimately accountable to the security of your company. It's your company, full stop. So the nice thing about the shared responsibility model for public cloud is we rely on really strong technical companies that have their security program together, whether it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft. AI is not that. It just is not that. Um, yes, ChatGPT or OpenAI pretty strong, Anthropic pretty strong. Um, you know, rando model that you can download off of Hugging Face. Not strong at all. So there's no such thing as a shared responsibility model that I've seen that makes any sense in AI. So I think it comes back to what Felix was talking about. We have to have definable, defensible controls that can be enforced. And everything, like I was thinking about the agentic topic, simple things like, do we treat agents like they're employees? Do we have to onboard them? Do we have to give them background checks? Do we have to monitor them as potential insider threats? Yes, and yes. And so I'm not sure where the question started. I've lost my train of thought. But shared responsibility model in AI, we'll see if there's a good framework that comes out of a reputable organization, but I haven't seen one yet.
That's a good point. I think when we look at least from the prompt perspective, when I work with people, AI is funny. Your answer has to be yes if or no but, right? Because to your point, if you're putting hard lines on these things, as I mentioned, not to pick on Copilot, but like I like certain things better, right? And Copilot, they all have powers, right? And I think our whole thing is like this is going to change. Like we've worked with people that say, "Great, this is what we've decided on," and then 3 months later they sign a different enterprise license agreement, and now we've totally pivoted, right? So you
Well,
have to have that wiggle room a bit.
so you hit something right on the head. So I had a customer that was adopting ChatGPT Enterprise and Grammarly, and they had service designs they wanted us to do a review of. For one of those services, they had a business associate agreement that spelled out exactly how that their data would be managed by that third party. Even though it's a large SaaS service, it still was able. They were able to negotiate sensitive data. This is how it should be handled. For the other one, they didn't have a BAA. They didn't have any contractual safeguards for their data. They had the vendors telling them they would do certain things and that they're not processing it, they're not storing it, they only process and then disregard. I think BAAs have become also a very important part. I'm a technologist, so like I normally veer to the technology solution there, but I think there are still contractual agreements that you can have with some of these services that can safeguard your enterprise because at the end of the day, it's nice that they support everybody and everybody's their own special snowflake, but my enterprise is the most important. And I think negotiating whatever safeguards your data the best is an additional thing that can be done for some of these services.
You mentioned actually kind of that program, right? Of evaluating. We've all talked a bit about whether it's agent to agent, like whether it's just MCP or AI in general. Like, what are we kind of looking at, and what kind of like lens do we see this from? Felix, you mentioned MITRE, OWASP. Like, what are some of the baselines and some of the frameworks and some of the content that you all look to when you're starting to try to understand how you want to either write those assessments, right? What you care about, or kind of how you govern what is and is not going to be allowed. Like, what kind of content are you referencing?
Yeah, yeah. So Cloud Security Alliance has the AI controls matrix. They're doing some good work there in regards to taking a look at some of these services. I think obviously from a more GRC centric kind of perspective, NIST has RMF and RMF maps nicely to if you're already CSF environment or your NIST shop. For me, when I take a look at like each of the different service providers, in particular, a lot of the cloud service providers are also offering up hardening reference architectures and guidance in that arena. But I would still say that most of my customers are lining up around looking at services from the perspective of RMF or CSA AI controls matrix. MITRE has Atlas, and in my opinion, MITRE is really front and center in a lot of the AI discussion because of the way that they're offering shared terminology. I think something as simple as what is an agent? It's no different than having an AppSec discussion and asking a customer, what do you consider an application? Is it the front end? Is it the overall business service? Is it the source code repo? Is it the source code itself? Like same thing is happening with agents. How do you define an agent? Something that talks to an MCP server, or there's still a lot of wiggle room in terms of what is considered an agent. So yeah.
I would add some of the other frameworks or sources for requirements or governance tactics. ISO has 42001. That's a pretty good AI focused framework. And then, simple things like our own internal requirements around identity management, authentication, monitoring, privacy laws. All of these things have to be synthesized into a cohesive governance practice.
Yeah, the shout out to OSP. I think one of the things I like about them is that they also every year it's the top 10, right? So it does have the sort of cadence of actually updating. I mean, the threats in this space are really like security writ large are obviously evolving faster than annual basis, but it does give you that sort of cadence annually to sort of understand how the threat landscape is changing.
And I
It,
think with this round
I was going to
of
ask you.
oh yeah.
I was actually going to ask you. I saw you do a talk a few weeks ago, and you mentioned another top 10, and I can't remember the source
Yeah.
of that.
So OWASP is doing a lot right now in AI. So they've got obviously the machine learning top 10. They've got the LLM top 10. They're pushing into agentic. They have their genai.owasp.org website that is kind of the culmination point for a lot of the OWASP efforts in AI. And there's multiple projects all running in parallel. There's coordination between some of the projects. And I think one of the interesting things to me for how OWASP is handling this is historically there's always that, how do I keep advocating for technology capabilities and not going product centric? But I think they're leaning in and there's more interaction between, the product size version of security and the strategy and non-product specific security elements. And I think by embracing both sides of that, you get what reality really is, everything needs to be broken down product agnostic, and then it needs to come back because at some point you may need a product to implement some of the things. So I think they're doing really good with their Gen AI projects.
Nice. I think as we look at this too, you mentioned the cadence is crazy, right? So the kind of with the time that we have, we want to have a little bit of fun. So what we'll do is we'll ask everybody. I'll go around the horn. One thing you think you can do today to make your AI security program better, and then a hot take for a prediction of what this looks like in a year, right? I'm interested, and it can be wild that I no longer have a job and get to and do anything else, right? All the answers are possible. And Dennis, I guess we'll start with you, right? If you could do kind of one thing or recommend people do one thing today to help secure AI, what would it be? And what's your take on where this industry and this market looks like in the future? Awesome. Dan, what do you think?
I'll stick with a theme that I've been talking about today too. So biggest thing you can do is find a source of inventory. Don't matter what it is. If you've got a CNAP tool, if you've got a DLP tool, if you've got an EDR tool, something that gives you a chance of discovering AI use in your environment, and I would have a high level of confidence that you'll be surprised. Um, and then let's see, forecasting for the future. I'm going to go that within the next 12 months, nobody will have to ever send another email again because your AI agent will take care of all your communications, and you'll just have to monitor to make sure they're sticking with your voice. So
That's a good
I'm
point,
hoping
right?
for that.
Make sure that the diction is aligned, right? Because all of a sudden, hopefully, I'm either much nicer or much angrier than I actually want to be, right? But that's a good
Yeah.
one. Felix, what's your outlook?
I'd say right now the most important thing to me is repeatable patterns based on the context of what's being sought after. I think like right now the enterprise is all over the place and they're trying to tackle every problem they can. I think that the exposure of certain design patterns and usage patterns is something that I grew up in architecture. I think that if you have, the Wild West, everybody's going to go the Wild West. But if you have, oh, this is the way to embrace agentic or agentic co-pilot coders, right? Like this is the approved enterprise way. Use this. If you have a reason to use something else, bring it to a review group that's going to take a look at the new technology. And then we have authorized versus unauthorized usage patterns. And then I think once we get past that, like you're going to start to get into the agentic element of that, and when we start to look at what are agents used for, what can they access, what can they not access, and as they start to move into the roles of the entry level participants in the process, I think you're going to start to have patterns around what tools will be exposed. This is what a persona is. This is what it should be doing. This is the output of the persona, and this is what it has access to, and we'll have patterns for that. And I think, if you go out a year from now, in my opinion, I think if you jump back, and I'm getting old in my experience now, but like early in my career, the build versus buy saga was very big in large enterprises around do we build this functionality or do we buy it? I think we're going to get a new era of that where the requirements coming from the business can now be, instead of doing 3 months of eval, 3 months of review and contracts and then implementation. Now we're just going to go with our AI group, take our requirements, build a certain functionality. I think the supportability of it is the only thing that's holding people back from doing those kind of functionality. So we'll see, but I think a year from now that's going to come up in a heavy way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Benji, I'm particularly interested in your outlook as someone who's tasked with building a program to secure the unknown future, I guess, right? Yeah, what would you say, I guess, and some of this may be a given of kind of something today, but I guess more importantly, your outlook on where it's going.
So the sort of advice and things I'm seeing working today, folks here talked about the sort of inventory visibility piece of it. For the folks building either homegrown application or homegrown agents, I think the need to early on think about and hopefully deploy the necessary guardrails is really key to as the systems become in sort of architecturally, you can think about both complex and simple, right? An agentic workflow, quote unquote, is like both simple and complex. And so setting up the sort of guardrails and sort of baking in the security early on in pre-production really helps and not delay something that is really business critical down the line. In terms of the prediction, I think, we've all been around the block with like security and AI, and every company around the planet has said they've been using AI since the dawn of time. But I think really this year, like I actually think this year, and I'll give you sort of a small tidbit. Now we've been using like anything from like basic classifiers through named entity recognition down to sort of more advanced AI. And like I'm really at the point of like we can just throw things at AI that like we had to take a long time to develop, just like throw it at like some sort of Gen AI capability, and it'll solve it in a way that's been like would have taken months and months of data scientists to solve. So I really think like the next 12 months from all around, not just like AI security, like security writ large will really be very radically transformed by AI, like in ways that, MCP and agentic pieces, I think are really just sort of scratching at the surface of it. So I think it's really going to be, this sound like sort of overly dramatic, but like really a new age of sort of security writ large that's powered by AI. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And my hot take is that at some point saying you're an AI company is a moot point because everybody is. And if you're not, you're
Yeah.
just not a company, right? Like no one touts
Yeah.
that anymore. And I think to your point, it's just going to be a given, right, on how these things go. So, um, well, we have 6 minutes left. I have not seen any questions in the Q&A in the webinar chat. If you have any, feel free to throw them in there. I'll give it 30 seconds. But as people are kind of pulling their thoughts together, really appreciate the time from Dennis, Dan, Felix, and Benji. I thought it was incredibly interesting. Again, we are very happy to be here with GuidePoint and with some of the industry leaders like Dennis and Dan. Prompt does help with a lot of these things. Like, funny enough, Shadow MCP detection and AI, I think, is a great place to start, and that runtime piece. If you're interested in talking to us, obviously feel free to reach out to GuidePoint, and we're here. But unless I see any other questions in there, which I don't think I do, all thank you very much for lending us your insight and your outlook, and have a great rest of the week to everyone on the phone.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.